And welcome to our conversation with the two candidates seeking to be your district attorney for the next 4 years. Tonight's forum is brought to you by FitFam El Paso, which has El Paso's largest social media audience, and El Paso Matters, a nonprofit, nonpartisan news organization that is our community's leading provider of in-depth and investigative journalism. Tonight, we're coming to you from the El Paso Community College Administrative Services Center, and we want to thank the Community College for being our host tonight. And we're streaming this on FitFam's Instagram page and at elpasomatters.org. Our goal tonight is to provide voters with information that will help them decide which candidate will get their vote for district attorney in the November 5th election. Our candidates are Bill Hicks to my right, the Republican nominee, who has served as El Paso's district attorney since December 2022. And James Montoya on my left, the Democratic nominee, who currently is a public defender and is a former assistant district attorney in El Paso. Each El Paso will have 90 seconds to introduce themselves to you. I'll then begin a conversation with the candidates, asking them a series of questions, most of which have come from voters in El Paso who have submitted those questions to us in recent days. For those watching tonight, you can submit additional questions on FitFam's Instagram account. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer each question, and because it's a conversation, I'll use my discretion to occasionally offer candidates a chance to briefly respond to something their opponent just said. After about 50 minutes of questions and answers, the candidates will each have 90 seconds for closing arguments. Before we started, the candidates flipped a coin. Mr. Hicks won the toss and chose to give the final closing statement tonight. That means Mr. Montoya will give the first introductory statement. Mr. Montoya, 90 seconds to introduce yourself to voters who don't already know you.
So we don't have a lot of time. I need to cut to the chase. The most important thing that you all need to know about this race is that the district attorney's office right now is critically and dangerously understaffed. They have lawyers in the DA's office doing the jobs of 2, sometimes 3 people. And it's been that way since 2021, since Ms. Rosales took office and had mass terminations of anyone that supported me in the Democratic primary 4 years ago. And unfortunately, despite Mr. Hicks's best intentions and efforts, he has been unable to rectify this critical and severe staffing shortage. And it's having very detrimental impacts to the cases and the safety of this community. Last week, a second lawyer who was working on the Walmart case quit on Mr. Hicks. Right now, in felony district court, there is a lawyer, a young lady, very bright, very motivated. She was licensed in April. She's been a lawyer for 6 months, and right now she's working on aggravated assaults, on serious felony cases. And there are people quitting the district attorney's office and telling me that they will come work for me in January, and they're quitting not because they don't enjoy the work, but it's because they're not receiving the resources, the training, and the leadership that they so desperately need. And so that's why I'm running for district attorney again, and that's why I'm the best candidate, because I have people who want to come and work with me to repair our criminal justice system.
Mr. Hicks, your introductory remarks?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Bill Hicks, and I am your district attorney. I have been so now for the past 2 years. I'll offer you facts. My opponent is offering you rumors and innuendo. I want you to understand that when I took over the office, we had about 63, 65 attorneys working for me. I currently have 73 attorneys working for me with outstanding 4 job offers. We are not in a critical shortage that my opponent likes to throw out as a rumor and innuendo. The attorneys that I have working for me, I'm very proud of those attorneys. They're hard-working attorneys. Could we use more attorneys? Yes, we do, and we have openings. So if you have friends who are attorneys, please have them apply. But I want you to understand we are not at some sort of critical shortage. And I want to say shame on my opponent for criticizing hard-working attorneys in those offices. We do have an attorney who has just been licensed who's now in felony court, but to say that she's by herself is a lie. She is closely supervised by one of the highest and most respected attorneys in the courthouse, as is every new attorney in any felony court. Closely supervised. She doesn't make any major decisions on any case without having the approval and supervision of that superior attorney, the trial team chief in that court. She was also mentored by the attorney who was leaving the court for over 2 weeks. The attorney, Michael Williams, has left the court to pursue. For the first time in his career, he is transitioning to something that is other than criminal prosecution, and he is leaving for personal reasons. And it is unfair to criticize that position. Look at his employee exit interview. He left for personal reasons, having nothing to do with my administration.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. And I'm sure we are going to come back to the topic of office staffing, but I want to go to some questions that have come to us primarily from the FitFam audience. And Mr. Hicks, I'm going to give you the first shot to answer this first question. The most common topic we got in the questions we received dealt with drunk driving. If you're elected, what steps will you take to increase enforcement against drunk driving offenders?
We're doing a couple of things to address drunk driving. Number one, I have an attorney that over the past 2 years, starting the first year I was in office, we've been giving that attorney some highly specialized training to address drunk driving and intoxicated manslaughter cases. This attorney now sits on a state board for drunk driving cases. She has now started in the past 6 months, 9 months, going out to the individual regional commands around the city and training every shift on what we need in our office to get better DWI convictions and what we need on those intoxicated manslaughter cases. That's a long process because every shift, every regional command has 3 shifts, and you have to go out to each one of those shifts individually, in addition to all of the cases that she's prosecuting. But we're starting out with individual training in each of the regional commands to start getting that training out to the individual officers to get better case reports. In addition to that, as you may be aware, our office is also taking a proactive approach with DWI voucher programs, trying to get people to not drink and drive, rather to take the free ride home voucher program. If you aren't convicted of drunken driving, you're not out there causing accidents, if you're taking our vouchers. We had over 2,000 of those vouchers taken in the past year. In my mind, that is 2,000 people that did not drive drunk, did not get in accidents, did not kill people. We have that program renewed for next year. I'm very proud of that program.
Mr. Montoya, how would you address drunk driving if you're elected?
Sure. So drunk driving is not just an El Paso issue. It's really a statewide issue. It's a notorious problem in the state of Texas. We have far too many people driving statewide because most of our major cities do not have adequate public transportation. We're a sprawling state. People drink and then they drive. And unfortunately, so when I tell you that what can we do here, one, we need increased enforcement by our law enforcement agencies. Both the El Paso Police Department and the Sheriff's Office have DWI task force. We need more officers on there. I would be willing to use DA funds to apply for grants so that we can step up increased enforcement from our law enforcement agencies. I also want to create a 2-lawyer vehicular crimes unit to handle not just intoxication manslaughters, but also repeat DWI offenders who are not receiving the attention that they deserve from the lawyers who are having to juggle their cases every single day. These repeat DWI offenders need the attention. They need to be focused on these specific kinds of cases. The third thing I'd like to do is pursue legislative change. The only way we're going to be able to catch more offenders is by expanding what our law enforcement can do. Right now, the state of Texas, we're not allowed to have DWI checkpoints. Those exist in the state of New Mexico. They are constitutional if the legislature approves them. That's something I really think we need to work on statewide to be able to increase the amount of people that we're catching doing this. MAD estimates that someone caught drunk driving the first time has done it 80 times before the first time they get caught.
Both of you in your responses talked about the role of police officers in the DUI process. Obviously, the DA can't prosecute what hasn't been arrested.
Right.
And you don't directly control the police and sheriff, and you can't tell them where to assign their manpower. But as district attorney, you're viewed as the chief law enforcement officer for the county. So how would you work with frontline law enforcement officers to improve road safety, especially as it concerns drunk drivers? And Mr. Montoya, I'd like you to take the first shot at that.
Sure. So as you noted, Bob, we are not the actual law enforcement officers, but we work very closely with our police officers and with our law enforcement agencies. It's a really important relationship that we have to keep and maintain. To me, like I mentioned in my previous answer, I think we need to be working with our DWI task force units to make sure that they're getting the staffing and training that they need. Like I said, a lot of them, they operate on grants. If there's grants that we can help them apply for to beef up not only their numbers, but how often they're able to work overtime. Right now I'm very proud that this was something that was started under Jaime Esparza. We have a 24/7 blood draw program where officers can go if they have somebody that they've arrested for suspected DWI that doesn't provide a breath sample. They can go down to the jail, have a magistrate sign a search warrant to get a sample of that person's blood. I trust the police to do their job. We need to meet them halfway and start taking these cases where we have repeat offenders that we can focus our time and attention on.
Mr. Hicks, how would you improve partnerships with police and sheriff?
Well, 3 things. First, we have continued to support the DWI No Refusal program, where we support the police department in getting those blood warrants so that you can't refuse. If you refuse, we're going to get a search warrant for your blood. Second, I have initiated group meetings with all of the chiefs of police, the regional director for DPS, and the sheriff. Every 5 to 6 weeks, we meet in the DA's office to talk about what issues the law enforcement communities are facing, what issues they're having with the DA's office and what communication the DA's office can have with the different agencies to help them communicate between themselves and the DA's office to further law enforcement goals of getting better cases and better enforcement. Obviously, DWIs, intoxicated manslaughters, are a big part of that communication. How can we get things moving better and smoother? Part of that is where we got the DA going out to the regional commands to help train the officers on the street. And number three, in those meetings, the chief of police in one of the school districts mentioned to us, hey, you know, we would like to pursue DWI enforcement around the school districts and at school district events, but we don't have the video equipment. We don't have the cameras. So our office is actively pursuing, and thank you for talking about grants, James, our office is actively pursuing grants for DWI equipment or cameras that we can put to the school district police departments. So our school district police departments can then get the training and the cameras to go after DWI offenders at school events.
Another frequent question we received dealt with what many people view as low bonds being given to some people booked into jail. So this probably offers us a good opportunity for education about the bond process, because this isn't something that the district attorney directly controls. But what steps do you believe are needed when it comes to how bonds are being set in the county or in the judicial district, and what steps would you take to advocate for changes? And Mr. Hicks, I'd like you to answer first.
So if a person is booked into the jail, within 48 hours, they're represented by someone from James's office, the public defender's office. At that bond hearing, the public defender's office advocates to reduce the bond of anyone who is still in jail at that 48-hour hearing. The district attorney's office advocates to keep them in jail, or advocates for a bond that is more reasonable, a higher bond. The public defender's office advocates for that reduced bond. It is up to the jail magistrate to set those bonds. The district attorney's office has no control over what the judge does in setting the bonds that are reducing and allowing people back out of jail. It is a great frustration to the district attorney's office when so many people are being released from jail on what we consider to be way too low a bond, or even on full personal reconnaissance bond, which means they aren't having to put up any money at all or zero funds. I will tell you that I have already spoken to the governor's office and to legislative leaders about what we need to do to address the bond issue. Everyone in the state of Texas is entitled to a bond, and there are certain criteria in the statutes that allow for how the judges are supposed to look at that. That is going to be a topic from the governor's office to the legislature this next legislative session, and I am poised to go and testify about that topic, and I'm very excited about that possibility next legislative session.
Mr. Montoya, your view on bonds?
Yeah, so, you know, at the end of the day, the judges at the jail are the ones that are deciding the bonds. And I know people are you know, disappointed. Sometimes they're upset by what they see in the news. You know, I trust the judges to make the decisions that they make based on the informed arguments from the state of Texas, from the DA's office, as well as from the public defender's office, or from whoever might be representing that person. I will say this, you know, there is a mechanism. You know, we pay to lock somebody up. It's $100 per person per night, and we pay for that. And so a big part of this job is deciding who is dangerous and needs to be locked up, and who is someone that we can safely let go, and they will come back to court and face their charges. That is the hardest part of this job, and it's a really hard part of being a judge. One of the things that we have never done here in El Paso County, and it's something that I'd like to do, is there is a mechanism to detain somebody without bond. In very limited cases, if someone is a repeat offender, if they've been to prison before, if they're accused of certain violent crimes or violating other terms of their bond. But it's very, very difficult because you have to have a hearing within 7 days of their arrest to basically prove up the case. And if the judge denies the bond, the case has to go to trial within 60 days. That's never happened here in El Paso because no one's had the time or the effort to do it. That is something that I would like to do for, again, the offenders who are dangerous, who need to be locked up because they're a safety to the community.
One follow-up for each of you on that. much of the bond policy changes in recent years have been driven by a desire by Commissioners Court to keep jail costs down. And that's part of the challenge, as James indicated. Nobody has a crystal ball to see who's going to be violent and who's not. But if the driver is to keep the jail population down, which also, by the way, helps keep people employed because they're not in jail, they can go to their jobs. How do we strike a balance in society between safety and expense? So, Mr. Hicks, if you have to work with Commissioners Court as DA, what would you tell the Commissioners Court should be priorities when setting bond policy?
It's not that I believe that everybody should be held in jail. I believe that everyone who gets out of jail should have in my opinion, a higher bond, or what I would consider a more reasonable bond. I don't think that
to ensure they show up in court. Right?
To ensure they show up in court, I think that they need to have more in the held responsible, more of their hard money on the ball, on the line, to assure that they're going to show up in court, and to ensure that they understand they can't be a future danger to society, that they have something on the line proving that they understand that, and that they can't just get out of jail with basically a get out of jail free card, a PR bond card. I believe that a more reasonable bond means that they have something in the game to assure the public that they understand that they can't just go out and commit another crime, or that they have a responsibility to show up in court and not go out and be a danger to society.
Do you have any evidence from bond settings that show that increasing bonds also increases the rates of people showing up for their trials?
What I have is a great number of cases where people are let out of bond on a straight PR bond, who are then out there either reoffending or not showing up to court, and then we have to issue a capias to get them back into court. And on that second time, then they are actually showing up to court. So the amount of cases that we have that we're seeing in our office where they're not showing up, or they're not reporting to PR bond, is very high. And that's not acceptable in my opinion. And I understand the Commissioners Court wanting to reduce costs through the county jail, but the bottom line is the county jail is made and designed to house inmates, and when we have an increase in crime and we're having an increase in the cases being processed in court, that's going to naturally correspond to an increased population in the jail. And we're going to have to deal with that until we get these cases processed through the court system and we get our system back into a more pre-COVID, in line with the more pre-COVID ideals and numbers.
So one last follow-up. Are we seeing an increase in crime? The FBI data for the last couple of years says we're not in El Paso.
No, we did see an increase of crime coming out of COVID. The numbers in 2024 are on a decrease. 2022, 2023 increase, 2024 is on a decrease.
The FBI data shows that 2023 had a decrease in El Paso.
The numbers that I've seen and that have been presented at our joint heads of department meetings with all law enforcement have shown increased numbers.
Mr. Montoya, the original question back to you is how do you strike the balance between trying to...
Let me clarify, Bob. The violent crimes were decreased. Overall crime rate was increased. So perhaps you're referring to violent.
Property crimes went down too. Now, the FBI data doesn't include things like DUI and things like that, so it's important.
Yeah, the overall crime.
Yeah. So striking that balance then, how keeping people in their jobs, keeping taxpayer costs down versus the public safety element and getting people to show up in court.
So people shouldn't be held in jail just because they can't make an $100 bond, a $500 bond. I mean, if somebody is not dangerous and they are likely to show up in court, we should find a way to be able to release them. Right now, the jail is the most expensive, single most expensive expenditure for your county government. I mean, it's over $50 million a year for the jail. That's a downtown baseball park every single year. And right now, we've seen so many more bookings from DPS and Operation Lone Star. I mean, we are experiencing $8 to $9 million more expenditures in the jail because of DPS. And right now, Paso County employees were not getting a step increase because of these increased costs of jailing. Right now, Bob, there are people, and honestly, I can't tell you exactly why this is happening. There are people who pled guilty months ago, in May, in June, in July, who are still sitting in the El Paso County Jail right now. They should have been shipped off to the penitentiary months ago. And they're sitting here because the DA's office hasn't filed the paperwork, given the paperwork to the clerks to send them off to TDC. And it's causing a tremendous amount of increased costs on our jailing when they should have gone off to TDC and shifted that cost off to the state. And we're bearing the brunt of holding these people for far longer than they ought to be.
Mr. Hicks, I definitely want to give you a chance to respond to that.
Certainly, two things. First, you cannot possibly, that's showing a great deal of inexperience on Mr. Montoya's part to try to ascribe the Commissioner's Court failure to properly budget, overall budget, to the to one issue being the jailings on OLS. Second, I gave the Commissioner's Court the opportunity to build a $17 million facility, a state-funded facility, to move all of our OLS cases through
OLS means Operation Lone Star.
Operation Lone Star, through a separate state-funded facility that would have entirely been state-funded through a series of issues that came through the Commissioner's Court. We were unable to make that happen. But I initiated and pushed for that to happen, and through failings through the Commissioner's Court, we were not able to make that happen. It is still in front of the Governor's office and may still happen at the early part of next year when we get into early part of budget cycle, the next budget cycle. If we do, then 100% of, well, at least 200 of the inmates would be cycled into a state-run facility at state cost, which is something I had greatly pushed for and attempted to have happen, which would have been a $17 million boom in construction cost for El Paso County, not to mention taking 200 inmates out of the county jail and putting them in a state-funded facility.
And what about Mr. Montoya's point about people who've pleaded guilty or been convicted sitting in the jail for months?
That is no longer the DA's fault, but I will tell you that is a holdover from the Yvonne Rosales issues that we are still discovering Yvonne Rosales' administrative changes. She instructed her intake division to stop putting, and this is complicated, but the TDC copy, the copy of the police report that goes to TDC, stop putting those, prioritizing the way that they're put into the filing system that the jail pulls from. We discovered that this summer, and of the, gosh, it was nearly 1,000 cases, we started correcting that as soon as possible. They have all been corrected now, but there was a backlog of inmates that needed to be shipped to TDC that didn't have those TDC copies. They now all have them, but because it's a tedious process, pulling them, scanning them, getting them in order, it is now on the jail processing all of the backlog of cases that our office, like I said, it was 1,000 cases, have all processed and put all of those TDC copies in place. Once we discovered the issue, my office has now corrected that policy under my guidance, have corrected the policy, and we are doing it the correct way, which ironically was the way Jaime Esparza's office was doing it before Yvonne Rosales' office came in and messed it up. But we're now doing it the correct way, and it's no longer an issue.
So if I understand the timing right, you discovered that this summer, so you were in office a year and a half before you discovered this problem?
That's a year and a half when the jail called us and said, hey, why are we not able to pull these issues? You have to understand, it took about a year and a half for the cases that were Yvonne Rosales's, because really they didn't, we had that 14,000 case backlog, right? So once we filed those cases, and then those cases start to get adjudicated, so they really didn't start getting adjudicated until my office came into play and we started moving those cases. So once we started moving those cases, then the jail started calling us and saying, hey, we don't have these TDC copies. So my office was individually pulling them and putting them in, scanning them and putting them in the file that the jail pulls from. And then we realized, hey, why are we having to scan a whole lot of these? And then the jail and my office got together and we discovered that there's 1,000 of these that over the 2-year period that weren't being put in, and we got together and figured out how to rectify the problem. So once we figured
what's your best estimate of the number of people who are in jail today who should be in state custody?
The last report I saw, which was earlier last week, was around 160. I think it's 160.
And we're paying $100 a day to house those people.
That's true.
James, do you agree with those numbers?
You know, I haven't seen the numbers from the public defender's office. It's been mostly anecdotal. I've seen a list. I did not count the list. It would not surprise me if it's in the order of several hundred inmates who should be off in prison that we're having to eat their housing costs here in the jail.
And you think that number's too high?
It's somewhere between 160, 180 at most, but I think it's around 165, 168 is what I remember seeing. And that's the people who are in jail waiting to go to TDC. Now, bear in mind, there's always, so once they're sentenced in court, it takes about 30 days for the court to finish their processing. And then after the court finishes their processing, then the jail has to do their processing, which typically takes another, normally it'd only be 5 to 10 days. But because they are backlogged on all of the people that they were waiting on from these TDC copies, they're processing them as quickly as they can. And my understanding is they only process maybe 5 to 10 a week.
So I'm assuming, since this has dragged on for more than a couple of years now, predating your entering the office, that there were probably people, large numbers of people, who served their entire state sentence in the jail?
No, because again, they weren't getting sentenced to TDC until my office, I came into office, right?
But the time they're spending in the jail usually counts toward the time served, right?
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So did we have people serving their entire one-year sentences at $100 a day?
Well, if it's state jail sentence, they can get from 180 to 2 years. If it's prison sentence, it's 2 years
Right.
and up, right? So just so we know what kind of days we're talking about. And there are always, and have even under Esparza, there have been people who have been in the county jail long enough that when they are being sentenced to prison, even once they're in prison, TDC is notified. TDC doesn't come and pick them up right away. TDC evaluates their sentence, what their sentence is, how many days they have in county, and then TDC decides if they want to come pick them up, or it's called parole and abstention. They parole them out of the county jail. So there have always been, even back under the 12 and a half years that I was in the DA's office under Esparza, TDC still has always paroled people out of our county jail. So that's absolutely correct. There were people, and still are people, who are serving their entire TDC sentence if we're giving them a low enough TDC sentence that serve it out of the county jail.
But, and I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is your fault because it predates you, but is it fair to say that the taxpayers of El Paso County, because of the policy set in place by your predecessor, have had to spend millions of extra dollars jailing people that should have been in state custody?
I don't know that millions is the correct number. I will say that yes, there are definitely hundreds of thousands of dollars that are billable to TDC when they should have, or people that should have been sent off earlier than they have been, should have been sent off, that haven't been. That's true. And I will tell you that as soon as someone is eligible to be sent to TDC, then El Paso County is able to bill TDC for their El Paso County time. So in those instances, once El Paso County notifies TDC, hey, come pick this person up, then the El Paso County can seek reimbursement. So the whole time the TDC is thinking about whether or not they want to come pick the person up or not, we can seek reimbursement for that.
But anything that's
prior
our
to that-
error, we can't see.
You are correct. Prior to that, it is billed on the taxpayer. That is correct.
Mr. Montoya, what are your estimates on the cost to the taxpayers of this?
You know, I would say it's certainly in the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, in the low millions. But, you know, Bob, to me, this one issue is just indicative of really this entire race. There are very serious problems that continue to exist in our criminal justice system, in our courthouse, that have not been addressed. I don't think you knew about this before I mentioned it. And so, you know, with all due respect to Mr. Hicks, things are not hunky-dory. Things are very, very dire right now in our criminal justice system. You know, I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but the DA's office does not have enough staff to handle the cases that they are accepting for prosecution. At the end of the day, they do not have enough lawyers and staff to prosecute the cases that they're accepting. Right now, Bob, the public defender's office, so when somebody gets arrested, they're appointed a lawyer, and they make a bond and they get out. And then the case goes to the DA's office and they take some time to decide whether to charge or not charge. Right now, the public defender's office has 1,400 people, clients, who are arrested, who have not been charged with a crime. 1,400. 500 of them are older than 2023. 500 people arrested sometime in 2023, before that, and they still haven't been charged with a crime. There are these very pervasive and systemic issues that are not receiving the attention they deserve.
And are those staffing issues?
Yes, completely.
So both of you addressed this in your opening comments, and we'll kind of come back to it. So let's talk about that. You've talked about what you stepped into, and I think that is an important scene setter here, right? The district attorney's office crumbled in the 2 years before you took office. Some of that was COVID, some of it are problems that your colleagues all across the country are dealing with in terms of pay rates and staffing. But El Paso also had unique problems, one of which we just talked about, not doing the paperwork necessarily to track them. So we could talk about how we got here, but why don't we start, Mr. Hicks, with you talking about what you've done so far to fix it and what work remains ahead.
Sure. Okay, well, first off, let's talk about rumors and innuendo versus facts. Rumors and innuendo were critical staffing. Facts, we are fully staffed in our staffing, in our legal secretaries, paralegals, investigators, clerks, victim advocates, fully staffed. If we have one position open, maybe two at most. We are fully staffed when it comes to our staff. The intake section is fully staffed, and we are running at 100% in our intake section. There is no issue with our intake section. Our intake section is hitting at 150%, as evidenced by the fact that we have eaten that 14,000 case backlog. The 14,000 cases that were sitting on the front door of the DA's office, we've eaten all of that. So I'm very proud of the work that those hardworking public servants in our DA's office have done to move the cases from the front door all the way into the court system. So that's not an issue. Mr. Montoya talked about cases that haven't been moved. I will tell you that we are sitting on cases that involve narcotics because the DPS lab is over 18 months backlogged on all of their DPS, on all of their drug testing.
So this is a statewide problem.
Statewide problem. We can't move the drug testing any further. Many of the judges in our courthouse were very impatient, and when we would file a drug case, a possession, a delivery, possession with intent, all of those cases, we would file them. The judges were very wanting to move those cases, understandably so, but we couldn't move them without a drug test. So with those cases lingering, we have decided to not file any of those cases until we get those drug tests back. That's one example. I've run out of time, but that's one example of why we haven't filed some of those cases.
James will respond here in a second, but I want to, I think, preempt one of his responses. You talked about staffing, but on investigators and those crucial parts of the DA's office. You did not talk about attorneys. So talk about where you are with attorneys.
Absolutely. So when I started off, about 63, 65 attorneys when I took office in December of 2022. We are at 73 attorneys with 4 offers outstanding right now as I sit here.
And how many authorized positions do you have?
We're staffed at 93. However, I can't fill all 93. Mm-hmm. I have a position one of my positions I can't fill because HR won't let me fill it. I have to reserve it to pay for overtime for staff. I have 2 other positions that I have to reserve because I have attorneys on grant positions. When those grant positions run out, I have to have a position I can put those attorneys at. So I have to move them back to general fund positions. So right now, if attorneys walked in the door, I only have 8 positions or 7 positions that I could hire right now in addition to the 4 outstanding offers. So I have 7 positions right now that I could truly hire into. 2 chief positions, 2 senior trial, and four or three or four general entry-level attorney positions. That's the truth. That's where we stand on what I could hire into right now today.
And if Mr. Montoya was the district attorney tomorrow, he would face the same challenges.
That's what he would. That's the hiring positions that he could hire into. He's talked about bringing 15 of his friends back to the office, but the reality is, unless his friends are going to take entry-level positions, and I guess voluntary to demote and take a $78,000 job position as an entry-level attorney, those are the only positions that are available. 2 trial team chiefs, 2 senior trial attorneys, and 3 or 4 entry-level positions.
So, Mr. Montoya, I want you to
I mean,
talk
that's
about
not
that.
accurate. I mean, there are people who are supervisors in the DA's office right now that have absolutely no business being there. And the only reason why they're supervisors is because they don't have anybody else. And so
You mean,
no.
when you say they don't have any business being there, you mean they're not qualified?
Right. Well, that they are not apt to be supervisors, but they have no other choice because there is nobody else in there. And so, to say that I'm bringing back 15 friends, no, these are colleagues, professional people that I've met working under Jaime Esparza, people that I've met working as a public defender, people in private practice who want to see a strong district attorney's office, who love doing this kind of work. I have people who went to work for Mr. Hicks who quit, who have now come and told me, I will come back and work for you in January. I have people who tell me now in the courthouse that they want to quit now, and I'm having to tell them, please hold on for just a little bit longer. There is light at the end of the tunnel, because they do not subscribe to his prosecution priorities or his philosophy or his management style. He is running people out of the office, plain and simple. There are people who are taking pay cuts to go work somewhere else because they do not want to work at the DA's office.
So talk about how you know that. Yeah.
They tell me. They tell me. Some of them are here. Some of them are here. Attorneys who were there, who left, and have expressed a willingness to come back, who enjoyed being prosecutors.
Why did they leave?
There wasn't flexibility on some of the remote scheduling. They didn't appreciate who was supervising them. They didn't feel like the person who was supervising them was qualified to be giving them advice or what to be doing. People who didn't enjoy, I'll tell you what it is, Bob. There are people who feel overwhelmed and overworked because there's one person handling an entire caseload that frankly 2 people should be handling. And one of the issues, and this is something you don't know, and I'm
There's
curious.
a lot of things I don't know.
Right. I don't know the exact number, but right now in the DA's office, I would say 10, 15 attorneys are fully remote. They don't even live here in El Paso. They're doing their job.
Pause.
Yeah.
Mr. Hicks, is that true?
That's not true. It's not 10 to 15.
How many?
How many is it?
We have 4 attorneys who are fully remote.
That do not live in El Paso County?
Correct.
There are 4 attorneys in intake. There are people assigned to the specialized units who are fully remote. And these are people who, like I said, they do not work in El Paso. And so they accept cases for prosecution. And then there's one person in the trial court who's having to handle all these cases that are being pushed upon them. When we talk about the backlog, the 14,000 cases, they were at the front of the DA's office. The police departments had come and left those cases. And when you accept those cases, where do they go? They don't just disappear. They don't get resolved. Then they go into the court. And so you're moving this tremendous number of cases now from the front end of the DA's office into the trial courts. And now lawyers are having to handle literally thousands of extra cases. And so, Bob, what I tell you is there's no guidance about how they should be using their discretion. There's no guidelines on what people should be prioritizing. And there's just very poor leadership.
So, Mr. Hicks, I want to give you a chance to respond at length to some of that. So we have this gap right now between 4 people working remotely and 15 working remotely. So, I mean, is the...
Again, rumors and innuendo versus facts, and it's difficult to go into all of the issues here because Mr. Montoya, with his lack of experience in managing people, I've managed people for 14 years. He's never managed a single person. and he wants to explain how he's going to try to go at the DA's office without giving you all the details. First off, he's just admitted he's going to pull an Yvonne Rosales by going in and firing a bunch of people to make room for the 15 of his friends. But let's talk about what we're talking about here. We have 4 people spread out in between intake and the different specialized units who are working remotely. I have a policy in the office that anyone in the office can work remotely up to 2 days, can work from home up to 2 days if they can work it out within their trial unit, their partners in their individual trial sections. So flexibility in the office is up to the individual trial unit as far as being able to work from home. Almost half of the office that has left, the attorneys that have left, and remember, I've replaced more than half of the people that have left, or I've replaced more than the attorneys that have left, but of the people that have left, almost half have left for more money or have left to move out of town. So we're talking the other half are the people that he's talking about that he claims have left because they're unhappy with my management. That's not reflected in their exit interviews. It's not reflected in the reason why they left when they talked to our office manager. So I don't know where he's getting these facts from. The disgruntled people, the people that left because they weren't happy with my management, is 4 people. 4 people, according to the exit interviews and according to the statements that they gave to our office manager. So, again, facts versus innuendos and rumors. Let me tell you something else. When it comes to wanting to work in the office, we had 4 interns last year. 4 interns who came from Houston, law schools in Houston, who had no ties to El Paso at all. In my long-term recruitment program, we're going around to all the different law schools in Texas. I recruited 4 people to come to El Paso. These 4 students had no ties to El Paso at all. They spent their summer with us. At the end of their summer, they said, not only is El Paso a great place to live, I want to come and work for you, Mr. Hicks. I want to be an assistant DA. Okay, now if we had such a bad place to work and if I was such a bad manager, why is it 4 people who could go anywhere in the state of Texas at the end of their summer said, I not only want to come live in a city I have 0 ties to, 0 family, I want to come live in El Paso, and I want to come be a prosecutor in your office.
Can I ask the flip side of that question? If you can have 4 students from Houston say we want to come to El Paso, why do you need to hire 4 people to work remotely with no ties to the community to run these programs?
Because we've had to do stopgap measures over the past 2 years. There was a shortage of law students going into COVID. That shortage of law students continued throughout COVID, and after COVID, the demand for law students has grown dramatically. In talking with my fellow DAs across the state of Texas, I don't know a single DA's office anywhere in the state of Texas that's running at 100%. In fact, one of my colleagues is running at 30% of his office. So across the state of Texas, the demand for lawyers, new lawyers, is very, very high. I'm proud of the fact that my long-term recruitment program has shown results. We have a law student from an Oklahoma law school who's come back to Texas. Well, I'm reversing the brain drain by bringing lawyers back to El Paso. Right now, my misdemeanor section is full, 100% full, because I have lawyers that I have brought in law students that are waiting on their bar results and who have just gotten their bar results, who are brand new attorneys because of my long-term recruitment program. Putting in that effort to go get young lawyers and bring them in is showing the results. Those law students, those brand new lawyers, those misdemeanor attorneys, man, they're full of enthusiasm, they're full of the zeal for life, zest, they're good lawyers. It's one of those new lawyers that we just promoted to felonies that I'm very proud of her work. She's an excellent attorney who has a lot of drive and is a very good up-and-coming attorney. I'm very proud of the work she's doing. She's one of our up-and-coming new stars in the DA's office that Mr. Montoya has an issue with. But I'm proud of her, and I think she's a great public servant who's going far in this office.
So, Mr. Montoya, I'll give you the last word on this, then we're going to move to another topic.
I'm not trying to misalign her. I know her. I know she's a bright lawyer and she's driven, but it is fundamentally unfair to stick someone who has been licensed for 6 months in a felony court. If you were the victim of a crime, of serious felony assault, and you found out that the lawyer working on your case had been there for 6 months, how would you feel about that? Would you be satisfied with that?
How long were you licensed before you were in a felony court?
About a year. Okay? About a year is what it takes. When I was I was there for about 10 trials. I had 10 trials in misdemeanor court before I went into felonies. Right now, misdemeanor lawyers, they're lucky to have 1, maybe 2 trials before they go to felony court. I speak to them in court and they tell me they do not feel prepared. It's unfair to them. And you know where we don't have staffing issues? The public defender's office, the county attorney's office, and we pay the same. It's the same pay for all 3 county offices, the county attorney, public defender, DA's offices. We don't have staffing issues. There are people here in private practice who are doing just fine with their caseloads. It's that people don't want to work at the DA's office. That's the problem.
I want to ask you both.
I want to say
Go
it's the same pay for less work, and it's also you're misstating her position. She is a young attorney in a court, but she has supervised every decision she makes, and she's not going to trial in a single case without her supervisor being there, and she is supervised by one of the most experienced and most dedicated and highly respected lawyers in the entire courthouse.
And Bob,
So it's
how many people
not
does he
appropriate.
That's what I was
It's
going to
not
follow up.
appropriate.
How many people is that supervisor also overseeing to make sure that this young attorney has the support she needs?
He has one other court, and right now that's his focus is on her. So she is his focus while she is being developed up.
Yeah, I don't want to make the whole conversation about one attorney. So the one last question on this issue, Commissioner's Court has a role to play here in setting salaries, setting your budget. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Montoya. If you're elected, what will you ask Commissioner's Court to do to help keep attorneys and help to recruit attorneys?
So the El Paso County, a few years ago, El Paso County set pay scales for attorneys, and it standardized them for the DA's office, the county attorney's office, the public defender's office. It is a competitive pay scale. Okay, we pay entry lawyers more than they do in Bexar County, in San Antonio. We offer entry-level lawyers competitive pay to Harris County and Dallas County. It is a entry-level lawyers here in El Paso are well compensated. That is not the issue. The positions exist, but where you ask me what am I going to ask Commissioner's Court, well, a lot of the folks that are in private practice that were willing to come back to the district attorney's office, they're going to have to take pay cuts. I mean, they're making more money now than they would be at the DA's office, and they're still willing to come back. Now, there are, on this pay scale, there's steps. There's some negotiating room where you as a department head are able to start somebody at certain steps. You can also offer certain people supplements, that the DA has control over an asset forfeiture account where they are allowed to offer salary supplements to employees. That's something that we're going to explore. Mr. Hicks does that. 2 of his employees get a $20,000 supplement. 1 of his attorneys gets a $30,000 supplement. These are bonuses that are paid basically with his discretion. Frankly, I think in those amounts, they're not exactly equitable, but that is something that we're going to explore, and we need Commissioner's Court consent to do that.
Mr. Hicks, what support would you ask for Commissioner's Court?
Well, let me say first off that this shows Mr. Montoya's lack of experience and understanding of how the system works. You can't offer any supplement without County Commissioner's Court approval. Anything that affects the pay of any employee has to be approved of by Commissioner's Court. And any supplement that you make comes out of your asset forfeiture account, and you only have a certain amount of money that you can spend every year out of your asset forfeiture account. And that budget, again, is approved of by Commissioner's Court. So how you address the asset forfeiture account and your salaries is all set by Commissioner's Court. And I've gone through that cycle twice now, so I'm very familiar with how that works. Also, to Mr. Montoya's statement that Bexar County pays more or pays less in their starting salary, I can tell you that in my recruitment, I've been to the law schools and to all the law schools in Houston, law schools in Lubbock, and we've also sent attorneys to law schools in Dallas and Fort Worth. I will tell you that we are not competitive. Our starting salary is not competitive with the large cities. We are paying less on our starting salary. At one time, our starting salary was competitive, but as the Commissioners Court have frozen step increases and frozen COLAs, every time they do that, they put us a little bit behind. A little bit behind every time they do that. And so now we pay more than the smaller district attorney's offices around the state. We also pay less than the larger cities around the state. So when I go to the big city, to the law schools, and I'm trying to recruit, I'm paying less than the big law firms, and I'm now paying less than the larger cities. So it makes it hard to recruit.
I'm going to go to one final question, and then we'll go to closing statements. The person who wins this election will oversee the prosecution of the most horrific crime in El Paso's history, the Walmart mass shooting from 2019 that killed 23 people and wounded 22 others. How would you approach this case, and why are you the best candidate to prosecute the Walmart mass shooting? Mr. Hicks, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. I've been a prosecutor for 12 and a half years, and then a judge for 2 years, and now a defense attorney for 9 years, and now the district attorney for 2 years. The Walmart case is a very near and dear a case to my heart. I use all of my experience to move this case forward. It is a critical case in our community. I have been working on this case. It was my #1 priority when I took over the DA's office, and it remains my #1 priority, moving this case forward. The Walmart case is absolutely what I am focused on in moving it forward. The Walmart case is absolutely what we are primarily focused on in moving it ahead. We have a trial setting from the court, and that is what we are focused on moving. The defense attorneys have filed motions saying that we are doing some unethical things, and I want to assure the public that there is absolutely zero concerns that I have that we are going to get past all of the motions filed by the defense. The defense attorneys have announced that they're not ready for trial. They are never going to announce that they are ready for trial. We are going to push forward and get this case to trial because that's what I believe needs to happen in our community.
Mr. Montoya, how would you approach the case, and why are you the best of the two candidates to take this to trial?
Sure. I went to the Walmart on August 3rd. I was there at the crime scene. I think he deserves the death penalty. I had heard from people in the community. They think life in prison in solitary confinement till he dies in 5 decades, they think that's the more harsh penalty. There are some people who think, victims' families, who think we should give them a life sentence and free them into general population and see what happens. There's a debate about what is the most harsh punishment. But that's not the law. The law is he a future danger to society, and is there any mitigation that warrants not pursuing the death penalty? One of the things that I'm most concerned about, Bob, is that the federal government, the Department of Justice, they decided not to seek the death penalty. Presumably because they were shown some mitigation information or some information that I'm not privy to at this point.
And which they have never disclosed publicly.
Right. And so, I'm dying to see what that is. I know Mr. Hicks has seen that. He has decided to pursue the death penalty nonetheless. But there was also a prosecutor in the office who says that those decisions are politically motivated, that his press conferences about the case are politically motivated. Someone who used to work for him said that. Okay? So I want to make sure I have a chance to see this information. I want to see the evidence of future dangerousness that hopefully somebody in the DA's office has been working on for the last 4 years. I haven't worked on the case since 2020. The first thing I want to do, if I'm the DA-elect on November 6th, is get to start looking at this confidential information that I have not been able to see.
Mr. Hicks, I do want to give you a chance to briefly respond to the issue raised. Loretta Hewitt, the former prosecutor in your office, did accuse you of being politically motivated in the prosecution. She's been subpoenaed to testify, presumably not in a favorable way to you on the October 31st hearing, so I want you to address that.
Let me say this. When I first took over this office, if you think back 2 years ago, D.A. Rosales had to take the Fifth Amendment and refuse to testify in a hearing regarding the Walmart case. The Walmart case was on the verge of not being able to be prosecuted by the DA's office. I made it my top priority to get the Walmart case back on track. And I'm very proud to say in December of 23, I announced that the state was ready to proceed to trial. That's what I believe is to be the true thing. The state is ready for trial. Since December of 2022, it was my top priority. This isn't about politics. This is about seeking justice for the people of El Paso. You can't come to our community and hunt down people on the basis of their ethnic identity and try to kill them and kill people and expect that this to just go away because you want the defense or some disgruntled employee to say it's political. That's crap. This is about justice for the people of our community. And you can differ whether or not you think it's a life case or a death case. That's fine. You can differ about this. But getting this case to trial and having this case heard and the evidence heard, that is justice for this community. And that's not politics. There's nothing political about that. That is justice, and that's what I want for our community.
That will wrap up the questions for tonight, and now we're going to go to the closing statements from the candidates. And as I mentioned at the outset, Mr. Hicks won the coin toss and chose to give the final closing remarks tonight. So, Mr. Montoya, we're going to start with you. 90 seconds for your summation.
Sure. So, when I ran for district attorney 4 years ago in the Democratic primary, I tried warning folks that Yvonne Rosales was going to be a disaster, that she was going to decimate and dismantle the DA's office. And that turned out to be exactly what happened. And I'm grateful and I appreciate that Mr. Hicks is not Ms. Rosales. There are no, corruption issues. But I'm telling you right now that the DA's office is barely holding on. They're barely getting by. In the public defender's office, we talk about the unprecedented level of success that we are seeing as a defense bar. Cases that are being acquittals. In the last 4 weeks, there were 4 acquittals at trial. 3 for child sex offenses, 1 for a burglary of habitation. These cases don't make the news, but we talk about it in the courthouse. And the talk is the DA's office is getting run over week after week. And it's not the employee's fault. I want to be very clear about that. They're trying their best. They're trying their hardest. But again, they're not getting the support, the resources, or the leadership that they need. And that's why I'm running again. And I hope I can count on your support. I have a plan, and I have the team that's ready to fix it. This is not about one person. And I'm proud to say that we have a team ready to go on day one.
And Mr. Hicks, you get the final word tonight.
Thank you. This election is about experience and leadership. I have it and my opponent doesn't. I've been a prosecutor for 12 and a half years before becoming the DA. My opponent for 7. I was a special assistant U.S. attorney for 4. My opponent for 2. I was a criminal defense attorney for 9 years. My opponent for 2. I was a district court judge for 2 years. My opponent 0. I've been supervising people for over 14 years. My opponent has never supervised a single person. I've been managing budgets for over 15 years. My opponent has never managed a budget. The DA's office has 220 people and a $33 million budget. We cannot afford on-the-job training. We tried that with Yvonne Rosales, and it turned out to be a disaster. We cannot afford on-the-job training. I'm very proud of the work that we've been doing over the past 2 years. I will tell you that the office sees on any given 4-week period over 300 pleas of guilty in any 4-week period. We move cases, and we move cases in a positive direction. Are there occasional not guilties? Sure, there are. But there are also some stunning guilties. We put a sex offender away for 170 years. We had a guilty just a couple of weeks ago on a domestic violence case, a felony case, where the victim testified for the person who had been abusing her, and yet we still got the guilty from a felony jury who saw that this person shouldn't be guilty, shouldn't be convicted anymore. And we don't hear about the continuous guilty, 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 guilty on the numerous murder cases. We're moving the cases forward. We're doing the right thing to protect our community. Thank you.
That concludes our forum for tonight. I want to thank Mr. Hicks and Mr. Montoya for this very informative and sometimes heated conversation. As a reminder, early voting starts on Monday, October 21st and continues through Friday, November 1st. Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th. Our team at El Paso Matters has spent the last couple of months compiling the information you need in preparing for the election. Our voter guide lets you see how the people seeking your vote stand on the most important issues facing our community. The voter guide is available online at elpasomatters.org, and much of our election content is being shared on FitFam El Paso's Instagram page. Print versions of our voter guide in English and Spanish are available at El Paso Public Library branches. And one final note. Today is El Paso Giving Day. This is a chance to support more than 250 of our community's nonprofit organizations, including El Paso Matters. So before you go to bed tonight, please consider going to elpasogivingday.org and making a contribution to organizations doing important work to make life in El Paso better. And if you find it in your heart to include El Paso Matters in your donations, we'd be very grateful. Thank you again for joining us. Get informed on the candidates seeking your support, and then get out and vote. No matter which candidates you support, the act of voting is an important way of showing your support for El Paso. Thank you and good night.